Welcome to another lesson of AP Statistics. Our learning targets today are to find and interpret the percentile of an individual value within a distribution of data, estimate percentiles and individual values using a cumulative relative frequency graph. Our task today is the dot below represents a random sample of the height of 2080 stat students rounded to the nearest inches. Okay, describe the distribution. And we already know that whenever we are asked to describe a distribution, we always follow the pattern SOCV, right? The SOCV. Let's start with applying the context. So the context in here, what are we talking about is the distribution of heights. I'm gonna make sure that I'm gonna put that in my description. Okay? The shape of the distribution of heights is fairly symmetric. Instead of fairly, you can use the word slightly symmetric. And bimodal, I said bimodal because I have two highest points. There are outliers at 56, this one, and 78, this one. The center is around the mean of 67.45 inches and a standard deviation of 4.807 inches. Like, miss, I think you're forgetting the range. No, I do not have to say what the range is because I'm saying what the standard deviation is, which is a better value to describe the variability of a distribution. Okay, moving on. Ariana is 65 inches tall. So where is Ariana? Ariana is right here. What percent of the heights are less than or equal to 65 or less than or equal to Ariana? So since Ariana, there's 5 points from Ariana all the way below, that would be 25%, right? So Ariana is at the 25th percentile. Okay? At the 25th percentile. And the word at is very, very specific. You cannot say Ariana is on the or Ariana is at or is the 25th. It has to be Ariana is at the 25th percentile. What is your height? Not whatever your height is, put that in the blank. And then you're gonna calculate your own percentile. So, for example, if you are 75 inches tall, right there, you're just gonna calculate your height out of everyone. Okay? And here you go. Next is we're gonna complete the table. All we have to do is count the points given in here. How many points are from 56 to 60? Or technically, how many points are from 60 and below? So we have only 1 point, right, at 56. And then your relative, remember the relative is the percentage. Our relative frequency there is 1 out of 20, which is 5%. And then my 61 to 65, I have 4 points. 1, 2, 3, 4. From 61 to 65, I have 4 points right here. Remember, that's not including the 55, right? Because 61 to 65. So you have 4 points. And that is 4 out of 20, which is 20%. And then let's continue. That's 11. That's 3. And that's 1. And so 11 out of 20, what is that? 55%. Then we have 3 out of 20, that's 15%. And then of course 1 out of 20 is 1%. 5%. And then cumulative relative frequency, what is that? What do you mean by the word cumulative, right? Let's have an example that is very common, your GPA. When you say your cumulative GPA, that means that is your GPA from all your previous classes up to this point, right? All previous classes up to this point. So technically in this example, what is the sum or the total of the percentage from 60 all the way below. From 60 and all the way below. And because we just started, right, that is 5%. Now, what is the cumulative, all the percentage from 65 and below? So that is now the combination of these two percentages. Yes. And then the percentage from 70 and below, that would be 80%. And then 95%. And then 100%. Right? Because for 80, that would be all the way over here. Right? For 80%. Hopefully that is making sense. Moving on. We're now going to have to transfer what the table is to our graph. This is called the cumulative relative frequency graph. And I want you to take note that these on the y-axis is the cumulative relative frequency. Well, so when you say 20 over here, 20 means 20%. 40 means 40%. Okay, let's move on. For 55 over here, how many points are from 55 and below? How many points are from 55 or below? Or technically, how many percent is from 55 or below? And I think we don't have one, so that's 0. And then moving on, what about from 60 and below? 60 and below is 5%. Is that 5% that side? What about from 65 and below? The cumulative was 25. Just right around this area over here. 70 and below is 80%. Oh, sorry. Is 80% right here. 75 and below is 95. And then 80 and below is 100%. And let's try to connect this one. And that, my friends, is what we call cumulative relative frequency graph. Now let's answer some questions on the corner. Mrs. Gallus is 66 inches tall. You have to estimate and interpret the percentile she is at using the graph. So if we look back using the table, it's easy, right? All we have to do is count the 66. We have kids that are 66. We just count the dots from 66 and below. But because we're instructed to use the graph, how are we going to be able to use the graph to estimate Mrs. Gallas? So let's try that idea. Mrs. Gallas is going to be around, where is Mrs. Gallas? Around this area right here. Because Mrs. Gallas is 66. So if I follow along, if I follow the graph, and then I'll just go up a little bit and go to the left. So I go up and go to the left, right? And then how many percent is that? That would be Mrs. Gala's percentile. So I think that's 30%. What do you guys think? Is it? So because Mrs. Galas is on the 30, I couldn't say 30% of students are at or below Mrs. Galas' height. Okay? So Mrs. Galas, what is Mrs. Galas' percentile? She's at the 30th percentile. She's at the 30th percentile, meaning she's not that tall, right? 30%, only 30% of students are at or below Mrs. Galas' height. Okay, letter B. The letter B is backwards of what we did. Because letter B, it says estimate and interpret the 80th percentile, right? We already know that based on the table earlier, but how do we interpret that on the graph? So you know how earlier I started with the inches over here, down here, and then I went up and I went to the left to find the percentage. Here on the next, on letter B, I have the percentage. I'm gonna make that one. Color would be purple. I have the percentage, so I'm gonna go from here go all the way to the right, and then go down. So, if you are on the 80%, based on the graph, your height should be your height should be 70 inches. How do we interpret that? And 70 inches is 80% of the height. 80% of the height are at or below 70 inches. Okay? I hope this is making sense. Now we'll give you an example, another another picture of a relative frequency graph, so you guys can practice how to do this one. Moving on for our important ideas. Our learning target, the first learning target was to interpret percentiles. So percentile is the percent of values that are less than or equal to a given value. And so when we interpret the percentile, we use the word at, not in. So like Mrs. Galas is in the 20th percentile, which that is wrong. Mrs. Galas is at the 80th percentile, and that would be the right way of saying it. Okay? For our learning target number 2, we learn how to graph a cumulative relative frequency, and instead of using 0% to 100%, you could also use the number 0 and 1. So you're gonna do 0, 1, 0, 0.5 in the middle. 0.5 means 50%, and then 1 means 100%. That's also okay. And I would like to remind you that the Q1 over here, you know that Q1 is 25% of the distribution, median is 50% of the distribution, Q3 is 75% of the distribution, right? Yeah, and we are going to use that on the next page. Mrs. Monson is concerned about how her daughter's height and weight compare with those of other girls of the same age. She uses an online calculator to determine that her daughter is at the 87th percentile for weight and 67th percentile for her height. Explain to Mrs. Monson what these values mean. Pause the video, try it on your own first, and come back to check the answer. Okay, let's start with, where do we start? The weight. So her daughter's weight is at 87th percentile. 87% of the girls of the same age have a height that is less than or equal to her daughter's weight. And that's how we will interpret her weight percentile. What about her height percentile? 67% of the girls of the same age have a height that is less than or equal to her daughter's weight. Okay? Moving on. The graph displays the cumulative relative frequency of the length of phone calls from the mathematics department office to Gabalot High last month. So we have our x-axis is the minutes in call length. That's how long the call was. And we have on the y, of course, our cumulative relative frequency. Okay, let's see what we can do here. About what percent of calls lasted less than or equal to 30 minutes? What percent of calls lasted less than or equal to 30 minutes? What about more than 30 minutes? So let's start with less than or equal to 30 minutes first. This is 30 minutes right here. And if you go all the way up, and if you go okay, draw a line. And if you can draw all the way there, and what do you think that is? Okay, let's see. And that would be 65%, or about 65%, right? 65% are less than or equal to 30 minutes. So if 65% are less than or equal to 30 minutes, this one, more than 30 minutes, I'll just subtract those two numbers, 100%, right? So I'll just do 100% minus 65% and I'll get 35%. So 35% are more than 30 minutes. Okay? Hopefully this is making sense. And estimate the Q1, the Q3, and the IQR of the distribution of phone call length. Let's start with Q1. In order for us to get the IQR, don't we need our Q1 and Q3 first? Okay? And again, in the previous lesson, the first quartile or the Q1 is 25% of the distribution. So let us do that. Where would 25 be? Would 25 be around this area? Oh, why are you moving? So 25 would be around this area. Oh, sorry. And there you go. And down. So about 13. Our Q1 is about 13, 25% of the distribution. Our Q3 would be 75 of the distribution. This was 65 earlier, right? So let's just go a little bit this way. That would be going down this way. And that would be, what is that, 32? About 32, 32 minutes. That would be my Q3. And so what is my IQR? So my Q1 is about 13 minutes. Do you guys see my wiggly equal sign? That means about or approximately. And then my Q3 is approximately. I didn't say equal because I'm not really sure. It's just like all estimates. So that's why I'm saying Q3 is approximately 32 minutes. So my IQR would be 32 minus 13. My IQR would be approximately again, oh, I forgot. Approximately 19 minutes. And that's it for today. I hope you guys understand everything that we talk about. If not, let me know during our meeting. I will see you on the next video. Bye.